Hey Ben, how's it going? How's the new role as homeschool teacher going?
It's doing okay. I was on duty this morning. Bethany was doing some prep for youth group and things. So although I felt like it was more YouTube teaching my daughter than me, but we got set up and did some little assignments today. So kudos to all of our home educators.
Learning the ropes of how to do homeschooling. Well done.
Yeah, and welcome to the Midweek Wrap. We're going to take a bit of time just thinking about parenting, relationships in general, but particularly for us as parents, spending a lot more time with our kids and thinking about the fatherhood of God and how that shapes us as parents. But first, a couple of administrative things. Just wanted to remind you about. I'm going to wait for Jordan to bring them up on the slide because I've lost my document. Oh, yes, our Zoom Courtyard catch-ups. Well, we're going to try this again on Sunday, simulating our Courtyard morning tea experience over a cup of coffee. So please join us after the service at 11:15 for that. Valley Youth is kicking off again. I think they never really stopped, but over the break we're keeping in touch with one another. But coming back with the new normal of a regular program on Fridays. So encourage your youth to get along to that. And
the preaching program will be kicking off into 2 Corinthians this Sunday. New series, but we just think there's a number of the themes in 2 Corinthians that are really helpful for the kind of things that we're facing at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ben, the Bible teaching.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking about in Deuteronomy 6, there's this instruction for the Israelites. Moses says, these words, he's just been reciting the law to them, these words that I'm giving you today are to be in your heart. Repeat them to your children. Talk about them when you sit in your house, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. So there's this sense that for God's people, for the Israelites, the word of God and relationship with God is just sort of a part of everyday life. And it starts with the parent in their own heart. These words are to be in your heart. But then also it flows out from there to relationship with our kids. Repeat them to your children. Talk about them when you sit in your house, when you walk along the road. There's kind of the structured moments, but then there's just the incidental things. You're walking along the road and you see a tree and you go, isn't it great that God created this amazing world and this tree? And God's been around and seen this tree grow, whatever it might be. But we're just in each other's lives so much more at the moment in terms of our kids, but whether it's our housemates or our partners, there's so many more opportunities for our faith and the Word of God to be a part of everyday relationships. So just wanted to encourage us to be looking for those opportunities.
You feel the challenge of that because you're with your kids all the time, but it's a great opportunity too, and we probably won't get so much intense quality time with our kids like this again, in our lives. So it's, I think we've got to see that, embrace it, and step into it. But one of the things that when you go from Deuteronomy and you get that great model of teaching, but in the New Testament we have this. Jesus gives us a picture of God as Father, and so perhaps more than anyone else in the Bible, Jesus keeps teaching us God is Father. And so, for example, in Matthew 6, when the disciples asked Jesus how we should pray, Jesus says, well, this is how you should pray, our Father in heaven. So he begins addressing God as Father. And again in Matthew 5, when Jesus is talking about how to relate to each other, he said, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. Quite a remarkable phrase there, that as we reach out in love to our enemies, we're being like our Father in heaven. That's who he is. And so there's times when, well, we don't want to say our kids are our enemies, but let's face it, there can be some challenges.
Sometimes it feels like it.
And we've got to think, well, how does our Father relate? How does he care for them? There's another great verse in 2 Corinthians 1, which I was thinking about this morning as I was doing some work on the preaching for this weekend, but there's this great verse where he talks about God as the Father of all compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles. So when we think about, well, if I'm going to be like God in how I relate, I'm going to be comforting and compassionate because that's who God is. That's how he relates. And so there's as we dig into that thing, what is it going to mean how does God comfort me? How does he show compassion to me? And how do I show that to those in my household?
That's great. And we know that God is loving, don't we? But it's really helpful to put flesh on the bones of what it means for God to be loving, and comfort, compassion is a big part of that. Paul kind of has this list that a lot of us are probably familiar with, 1 Corinthians 13, of what love is like. He said, love is patient, love is kind, love doesn't envy, it isn't boastful, it isn't arrogant, it isn't rude, it isn't self-seeking, it is not irritable, it doesn't keep a record of wrongs. Love finds no joy in unrighteousness, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. I feel like we could do another whole episode unpacking those different things, couldn't we? But for us to be loving with our members of our household at the moment, to be patient, it boggles my mind to think that God has borne with humanity and human sin for thousands of years, and I think that I have to wait for my child, for me to repeat this thing 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and it nearly does my head in. But the amount of patience God has had with his people, with me as a sinner trying to grow in godliness, and the same sins coming up again and again. And I often find it really helpful to reflect on God's patience as my father, as he's trying to teach me, to then have a deep breath and try and be patient with my kids. Just changes perspective a bit. But I hope that's helpful for us as we think about loving our kids and our members of our household at the moment. Thanks for joining us on the Midweek Wrap. We'll see you on Sunday for Valley Live.
See you then.